Smarties, today we're back with another episode that we thought was really meaningful and wanted to re-air it for you. Today we're talking about how business mindset impacts educational therapists.
This episode initially had come about because, frankly, we had been through such an evolution within our own practices, being a solopreneur, working just for ourselves, and then growing a team, and then launching this podcast. So, Steph, you and I have had a lot of iterations of our businesses and a lot of growth within them. And there's been a lot of mindset work that we've had to do in each level. And so we wanted to chat about it with each other and with you, our audience. And if these are the conversations that are meaningful for you, it's the start of a brand new school year. And so everybody's sort of like gearing back up to get going. Steph, I think you have a few slots available for business coaching this year. I have maybe one, maybe two available for business coaching this year. So if you are interested in collaborating with us in that capacity as business coaches, we love helping other educational therapists do this work. Remember, part of the mission of this podcast is to provide broader awareness and access to the work that we do. So the business coaching is just another element of that. And we're also deeply passionate about women and men earning what they should. And we're in a helping profession, so that's always something that comes up in this mindset conversation and in the one-on-one coaching that we do as well. Let's dig in.
You want to learn faster, but sometimes working harder is just not the answer. You have to learn smarter. The Educational Therapy Podcast.
Hi, Smarties. Welcome to episode 226 of Learn Smarter, the Educational Therapy Podcast. I'm Stephanie Pitts.
And I'm Rachel Kapp.
And today we're talking about how this podcast led to our expertise. This is an interesting episode.
Yeah, we've gone back and forth on it.
Yeah.
I'm not ashamed to pull back the curtain and share a little bit. I wanted to do this one, and Steph's not so sure. Steph, do you want to share why you're not so sure?
I felt like it was a lot of patting ourselves on the back.
And I argued, look, as we're sharing more about business stuff and how we sort of think about that side of things and how we do think about the work that we do as a business, and we think that's an important mindset shift that we talk a lot about in Learn Smarter Pro. We talk a lot about that in coaching, especially as people who are drawn to the work that we do are helpers.
Yeah.
And so thinking about something as a business can feel uncomfortable. But I think there are opportunities that will arise. And every time you say no to something, you're saying yes to something else. And vice versa. Every time you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else. We went through a lot of work mentally from a mindset perspective to even launch this podcast. And then again, when we decided some 20, 30 episodes ago to start talking more about the business stuff on the podcast. And we knew that we were saying yes to opening ourselves up in a really vulnerable way. And by sharing the impact of saying yes to doing this podcast and sharing that story, I think it can help others as they are going along and making decisions about how they want to spend their time.
When we do Learn Smarter Pro, every single time people are struggling with the mindset issues. And it's the exact same thing that we struggled with starting the business and starting the podcast.
Maybe we skew this instead of how the podcast led to our expertise. We're changing things on the fly.
Yeah.
Because we're allowed to pivot whenever we want. Maybe we talk about the mindset and sort of what we predicted the outcomes were going to be and what the unintended outcomes and like the things that surprised us.
Very different than what we originally thought.
Yeah.
When we first started the podcast, we wanted to provide access to people who didn't have access to a therapist, so that if parents wanted to work on things and they were struggling at home and they didn't have access to an ed therapist, this would be a really great way for us to share our knowledge and help other families that we couldn't actually physically help. Because remember, we weren't doing Zoom then.
And we were very aware that educational therapy is localized to 3 or 4 major cities. It's not everywhere yet. It certainly has expanded. We've been doing the podcast, 4 years? Mm-hmm. And so it certainly expanded over the course of those 4 years. But that was really the very simple mission, which didn't feel simple to us at the time.
No, past Rachel and Steph did not feel like that was simple.
No. And I would say the only reason we're talking about it like that is because we put in our 10,000 hours on podcasting at this point.
For sure.
This is what we really thought was going to happen when we launched the podcast. We really thought that we were going to expand access to families that weren't local to an educational therapist, or educational therapy wasn't an option because of financial limitations or scheduling.
Or even knowing what educational therapy was.
Right. You know, we really wanted to expand awareness. Mm-hmm. Now, we thought we would expand, and we thought that the listeners would be mainly parents. Mm-hmm. So what surprised us was that a lot of you guys were listening, and you were educational therapists, or you were learning specialists,
teachers,
or tutors who were doing more. The tutors who did the extras, right?
The tutors who were unknowingly meant to be educational therapists.
Right. And so the unintended outcome, which is a feel-good moment, give us this. We're at episode 226, give us one, where we pat ourselves for a second and just say there are people who have transitioned into this field as a result of the podcast. But what I think personally, the unexpected outcome was that by doing this podcast, we were forced into figuring out what we think.
Yes.
And the impact that that has had on our businesses, we're going to lay out a few, but it has been tremendous. Steph, what would you say has been the mindset work around constantly writing for the podcast, constantly engaging with ideas, and looking at the work that you do with your clients from the perspective of how can we globalize this for the podcast? How has that shifted things? Has it gotten easier?
Oh, it's definitely gotten easier, for sure. For sure gotten easier. But I think a lot of the times that even when we were looking at our show notes and things that we were writing when we first started, we were writing out all these notes so that we could talk. We had to come up with how we felt about things, what was our process, how we wanted to approach things. And it wasn't reactive as much as more of a proactive way of doing things. So we knew what we thought about that instead of reacting to when it happened. And I mean this in all kinds of ways. When we got a learner that was different than learners we'd worked with in the past, or when we got parents that were different than we'd worked with in the past, or just how we did things both clinically and professionally became more clear.
It became easier, I found, to explain the work that we do.
Yeah.
To parents who were unfamiliar, who were calling into the practice. It was, look, there are a lot of things that got easier as a result of sitting down and thinking about what we thought. Like the copy on the website got clearer. Mm-hmm. And since launching the podcast, we both have brand new websites. And how we talk to potential clients has gotten easier. How we onboard clients has gotten clearer.
Yeah. Our framework
was transformative in terms of setting expectations, which is something we talk a lot about in Learn Smarter Pro. The framework is essential for helping families to understand the work that's about to happen. Mm-hmm. Look, I don't want to hire someone to paint a room in my house without knowing the color they're going to paint it, right?
Yeah, fair enough.
And so the framework allowed parents to have a visual and understand that. If you haven't listened to our framework, it's episode 37. We'll link it in the show notes. And one of the really cool things is that it has helped us to spark conversations with people who we never could have predicted would have been interested in the work that we do. Those conversations have very often led back to episodes on the podcast as well.
For sure. So I guess that the takeaway that we want to send you with is think about what you think.
Yeah.
Because that's really helpful. And we can teach our learners to think about what they think as well. So you can make it easier on yourself. Everything can get easier, right, with practice, but being mindful and purposeful with it makes it a lot easier. So try.
This is not to say that you have to go out and launch a podcast or write a blog or do a YouTube channel or don't do all that. It's not going to bring you clients. But what we're saying is being intentional about themes that are emerging with the clients that you are working with and how you approach it can make your work easier.
Yep. And who doesn't want that?
We hope we were clear in this episode about what we were trying to share. If you want to talk more with us about how your mindset is impacting your work, feel free to reach out to us at Rachel and Steph at LearnSmarterPodcast.com. We both have a few coaching slots available. So if you don't know, we both do one-on-one coaching as well as Learn Smarter Pro. Learn Smarter Pro is our group coaching option. And we both do one-on-one coaching if you just want more direct and clear access to us. Honestly, it's some of our favorite time throughout the week. We love doing the coaching. So definitely reach out to us if you want to talk about how to shift your mindset.
Yeah.
It'll lead to more profit and more enjoyable business.
I like it.
So have a great week, Smarties.
Have a great week.